Tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Welcome to the Auckland Unitarian Church. Welcome to people of all faiths or secular ways of life. Welcome to those of you who are visitors today, whether you are passing through or looking for a spiritual home. We hope you will join us afterwards over a cup of tea or coffee. My name is David Hines. I'm a newish member of about 3 years in this congregation, and I'm even more recent as a member of the Worship Associates team. So I'd like to thank the leaders and members who were here before me, a whole team of them going back 115 years. I've often been inspired by your inclusiveness and your dedication to justice, and I hope that will happen for all of us today. My opening words today are from an Austrian philosopher called Otto Neurath, who fled, I think, from the Nazis just before the start of the Second World War. And he found that his beliefs and his philosophies were all in absolute chaos. And he wrote this poem, amongst others, to say how we have to rebuild our way of thinking about life, but we can never do it from scratch. We always have to do it with the bits and pieces we have left over. He says, "We are like sailors who on the open sea must reconstruct their ship, but are never able to start afresh from the bottom. Whenever a beam is taken away, a new one must at once be put there. And for this, the rest of the ship is used as a support. In this way, by using the old beams and pieces of driftwood, the ship can be shaped entirely anew, but only by gradual reconstruction." It's better to light a candle than to curse the darkness. It's better to let its light show where you stand, for its glow will melt the night like the coming of a new dawn, and hope will be born from that small flame in your hand. Well, somebody asked me to give a sermon about atheists. Although I'm an atheist, I haven't actually preached about atheism itself before. I'm fairly new to this way of thinking. I took that step in my mind in 1986, but I was mixed in with my Christianity, and I didn't join any atheist organisation until 5 years ago. So I'm speaking today as a learner, and I want to speak and focus on the difference that our different beliefs play in our lives. Because Christians, humanists, atheists, Jews, other people have lots of things in common, and they may possibly be more important than the things where we are different. However, I still believe the differences do matter, and they matter in practical ways. For instance, do atheists have a different attitude to science? I think they do. It was an election issue for many of us this year. Do they have a different attitude to morality? Yes, laws were changed in Australia a few weeks ago about gay marriage, and atheists worldwide would have welcomed that. And do atheists have a different way of changing a light bulb? Well, a couple of weeks ago I found to my surprise that they do. I'm an atheist. My wife Marion is a Christian, and a couple of weeks ago she asked me to change a light bulb in our home. Now, like many atheists, I get to do the technical jobs around the house, and I like using logic in the way I do things. And Marion, on the other hand, is a Christian, and she does most of the hospitality and the shopping. And it's because we both contributed to this light bulb that this story came up. The main bulb in our lounge had blown. Marion had gone and bought a new bulb. So I approached it logically. I got a ladder from the garage because it's dangerous changing light bulbs if you stand on a chair. Then I switched the light off at the wall so I wouldn't get an electric shock as I put the battery in, the bulb in. And then I locked the braces on the ladder so it wouldn't fold underneath me like it happened once before when I used it to do that kind of job. Then I climbed the ladder, and unscrewed the old bulb, and then I did a double take because the old bulb was a screw-in bulb. But the new bulb, it said on the packet, had a bayonet bulb in it. So I said to Marion, "You've got the wrong kind of bulb. I'll go and buy a screw-in one." And Marion didn't question that idea, but she said, "Why don't you take this other bulb back and change it?" And I said to her, "Do you know where you got it from?" And she didn't. And at this stage, I felt very uncomfortable indeed. And I said to her, "I'm not going to look stupid and go around the shops in Auckland hoping that I might get the one that you bought this from." And she said, "Why not try it anyway?" Like a Christian, I think she was using her intuition. So I thought I would use my logic and track down where her intuition was leading. So I said to her, "Where is a good place to buy bulbs?" And she said, "Lighting Plus at St. Luke's." So I figured that's probably where she got it from. And that's where I went. And it turned out to be the right place after all. And I told my embarrassing story to the salesman. And he said, "No problem, we sell that brand and we will happily change it for a screw-in bulb." Was I relieved? So I handed him the box with the light bulb in it. And he looked at it and he said, "Hang on, this has got a screw-in bulb in it already." And I said, "How come it's got a picture of a bayonet bulb on the front?" He said, "Turn the packet round. I should have brought it to you to show you. You turn the packet round, and one side it's got a screw-in bulb, and if you turn it round, it's got a picture of a bayonet bulb." And so, sure enough, I'd had a screw-in bulb in this packet all along, but despite atheists' belief in looking for evidence, I hadn't actually looked for the evidence of whether there was actually that kind of bulb in the packet. So the moral of the story, well, probably a very complicated one, but it's that atheists and Christians do have a different way of changing a light bulb, and mine is not always better, but I would still rather be an atheist for other reasons. Eh? Yes, there are. Well, anyway, my second question then, I've established that there's a pretty vague answer on light bulbs, but do atheists and religious people have different ideas about science? Well, it seems obvious that they do. All the atheists that I know look to science to explain how the universe got started. They believe the universe started as a tiny dot 13 billion years ago and has been expanding ever since. Whereas some religious people think it was created by God 6,000 years ago, complete with all the animals in 6 days. Most atheists, in fact all atheists, think living things evolved into different species very slowly by natural selection. But some religious people don't believe in evolution at all. Quite a few religious people believe in evolution, but they make compromises in it. For instance, the Catholic Church official position is that our bodies evolved by evolution, but our souls were added by God personally after our bodies evolved to the right level of intelligence. And other religious people believe God steered evolution to make a world that is good for living things. Atheists don't go with any of these compromises. They believe the world was not created to be good for living things and that evolution treats them very brutally. My favourite example of this comes from Richard Dawkins, who is a world-famous authority on evolution, but also a leading atheist. And he says, when you look at specific cases of evolution, things may look as though they are well designed, but it is an illusion. And the example that he gives this is, look at cheetahs and gazelles. They are two of the swiftest, best designed animals in the world, two of the fastest, two of the most beautiful. And yet, has it done them any good? And he said, well, how did cheetahs become such fast animals? And the reason is that for many, many generations, only the fastest cheetah could catch the prey. And if you were a slow cheetah, you would die before you could have any children. And ditto for the gazelles. Gazelles also have only become faster by over thousands of generations, where only the fastest gazelles would get away from the cheetahs. And so if you look at it overall, what is the purpose of the beautiful speed of those two animals? And the answer is that it does not advantage any of them. When they were much slower, they still couldn't outpace each other, still neither could get ahead. And now that they're both going among the fastest creatures in the world, it still doesn't help them anything. They're no better off than when it all started. Another story told by Dawkins to show how vicious competition can be, he said there's not just competition between cheetahs and gazelles, between prey and predator, there's also competition within each species, between the different ones. So, for instance, this is a story he tells. Two hikers are in a forest, and they meet a bear. One of the hikers sprints off as fast as he can. The other one stops and puts on his running shoes. And the first hiker says, "You can't outrun a bear even with your hiking shoes on." And the second runner says, "No, but I can outrun you." And I figure once the bear has eaten one hiker, he won't be needing another one for quite a while. And in fact, this is just the story of way evolution explains living things. It's just the last in a series of arguments that the world was not designed by a God. Going back 2,000 years, numerous skeptics have made this point in different ways. I'd like to mention three of them. One was in the Bible. The book of Job is a long fictional story about a man who is morally perfect, and yet all kinds of horrible things kept happening to him, diseases and things being stolen, his crops being burned, and his friends come to console him, and they each have got a different theory of why all this suffering is coming towards him. And one of them says, "Your suffering is a punishment from God. You must have done something dreadful to earn all this punishment." And Job turns down that argument. And a second friend comes up to him and said, "No, it's not because you are bad, it's just that God is testing you to see if you are really a good person." And Job rejects that argument. And a third friend says to him, "Well, your suffering is pretty unfair in your lifetime, but God is probably going to save up and repay it, all this unfairness, by doing good things for your children." And Job rejects that and said, "I want to see these good things in my own lifetime." And another friend then says, "Oh, well, God is punishing you because you are too argumentative." So poor old Job, whichever way he goes, he can't win with this adjustable God. And in the second to last chapter of the book, God himself joins the argument, and he says, "I'm the creator. I don't have to explain myself to human beings." A very bitter, long, carefully argued story, which really doesn't come up saying there is no God, but it denies that there's any God who is helpful to us. Another version of this argument was from the Greek philosopher Epicurus, who died in 270 BCE. He just put four different ideas about God and balanced them. He says, "Is God willing to prevent evil but unable to do so? If so, he is not omnipotent. Is God able to prevent evil but unwilling to do so? Then he is an evil God himself. Is God willing and able to prevent evil? Then why is there evil in the world?" So he looks at four different options, and none of them make sense. In the 18th century, a leading philosopher, David Hume, revived this argument by making a dialogue of three characters. One of them argues that the world is so good, it must have been designed by God. Another one argues that the world is so bad, you need God's help to cope with it. And a third one pits the other two against each other, and so this argument goes round and round in circles. He wrote this 100 years before evolution was discovered, but evolution seems to have proved it's right. Over the past few years, I've heard lectures from several religious speakers who believe in evolution but still think there is room for God in there. And they all criticise Richard Dawkins. They say he's not fair in arguing against Christian ideas because Christians have moved on. They have a different idea of God now. But I would think if you look back over history, you'll find that the people arguing against evolution did in fact consider many different ideas of God. The book of Job considers about a dozen of them. Epicurus thought of about 4 of them. Hume thought of 3 of them. All of them, that the idea of diversity has been thought through very thoroughly and very critically. And the trouble is, many people want different things about God, but they unfortunately can't get them together. You can get a God of justice who inspires you, but then you have to say that God of justice can't be omnipotent because he's not getting it done very fast, is he? So those are the reasons that atheists would not believe in God, and why they believe in science, because science is surely the best of all tests of the design of the world. It looks at all the animals and all the plants and all the bacteria and all the viruses in the earth, and says all of them have stories that explain how they came to be. There are thousands of different stories, a different one for each one, but they all work by natural selection. I sometimes, as an atheist, still sometimes enjoy songs about God. If they speak of a spirit of love, I can identify with that. I just can't think that spirit of love is an actual separate being. I think a spirit of love is a human thing that developed by evolution. Even animals learn how to love. All mammals love their children, and many animals, including ourselves, love other people. But it doesn't happen because of a God designing us. It happens because it helped us to evolve. Sometimes the religious ideas of God do no harm at all. Many cases I would say they do no harm. But one example is the Americans deciding in the last year not to support the international Paris Agreement on climate change. And that was because President Trump didn't believe there was climate change because he was ignoring all the evidence from science. And one of his supporters, Senator Tim Walberg, said last May that he wasn't concerned about the effects of climate change because if there's a problem, God will fix it. And he himself was an evangelical pastor. And the Bible definitely supports that idea. The Bible's story of creation says all these things were made, the earth was made for humans, and God said, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. Now that is hardly a recipe for caring for the environment. And the key bit of climate denial is in the story of Noah, where Noah comes out from the ark and God makes a promise that never again will he send a flood of that magnitude on the earth. And God said, as long as the earth continues, seed time and harvest will repeat. And of course, under global warming, seed time and harvest and the seasons will not repeat. And it's because of human interference. So that's one of the strongest arguments that has been used by creationists to deny climate change. But anyway, I believe, and also all atheists would believe, that science is one of our best ways of explaining how the world came to be and how we should deal and how we can deal with the problems it creates. But there's another area where atheists and religious people differ, and that's where does the authority come for our moral decisions. And a number of religious people say it comes from God. God is the one who knows best what is for us. God has written in the Bible his advice as to how we should live. And atheists, of course, don't believe that, and they would run their lives, they try to run their lives by general principles and using reason, such as the golden rule, do for others what you would like them to do for you. But atheists like to point out that the golden rule existed long before it was spoken by Jesus. And I looked up in Wikipedia, and there's about 10 different religious leaders who've used the golden rule, as well as non-religious people. So does the golden rule come from God? Well, I think it doesn't. I think it comes from the fact that people from all these different cultures have all by experience found that life is better if we care for one another. Our ordinary experience of raising a family teaches us this. Every parent must teach it to their children, otherwise their family will be chaos. However, I also think that religious people as well have discovered this and written it into their traditions. And one example would be Jesus himself. Jesus didn't write the Golden Rule from scratch. He was a Jew, and he knew the command to love your neighbour as yourself, which was in the book of Leviticus. And when he was asked what was the supreme rule, he quoted that. But he didn't invent this rule. He did it by critically thinking about all the Jewish commandments and saying this was one of the most important. But another Jew who lived just 50 years or so before Jesus, Rabbi Hillel, he also discovered the Golden Rule by doing the same kind of critical thinking and saying, somebody came up to Hillel once and said, I want you to teach me about Judaism, but I don't have much time, so I want you to tell me all about it while you're standing on one leg. And so Hillel stood on one leg and he says, what you would like others to do to you, do to them. And he said, that's the summary. You need to read the Torah to find all the rest. But I would say that all those religious people were using their common sense. They were using experience. They were not giving God as their reason. They were just critically thinking, how do humans live better together? So I would say this is a supreme example of how there was no serious difference between religious and non-religious people. All of us learn from experience. All of us learn to care. But some religious people, when they see these things written down, they take a shortcut and say, I'm doing this because this is what Jesus taught. Well, and atheists say you're crazy, but they're not that crazy. They also have good practical reasons for doing what they do. So this is how I've come to reconcile my atheism and my Christianity. I find a lot of the things that Christians teach do make practical sense. They are not being told, you've got to do this because God said so. They're told, we recommend you do this because it will make your life together much more peaceful. And so this is when I meet atheist people and they start rubbishing Christians, I find myself defending the religious people in that case. And I say, the religious people may seem to be crazy, but a lot of the things they are doing are based on common sense, and that's why they very often come to the same conclusion that you do. But they don't always come to the same conclusion, and one of the areas where they don't come to the same is where there is some Bible principle that suggests an extreme kind of behaviour, like the arguments against abortion, like arguments that men and women have different roles, like arguments against gay rights. All those come from religious people who quote the Bible to back them up, and yet all those exceptional shortcut answers from religion are being discarded one by one. And I think it's a sign in some ways that the human race is learning from its mistakes. In America, which is still a highly religious country, they gave up the exclusively heterosexual idea of marriage in 2015 because the Supreme Court ruled that was discriminatory. We ourselves did the same in 2015 and passed a law with the support of many religious people. So we learnt the lesson, and as of last week, the Australians have also decided that it's okay for gay people to marry. So it seems to me that there is, despite our differences, there is huge common ground between religious people and non-religious, and there is quite a hope for our planet because they do get together, and I'm very proud to be part of one way where they are getting together, where the atheists in Auckland decided 5 years ago they wanted to work for secular education in our schools and for all children to be treated equally and to have all religions taught equally in our schools. It's quite startling to think that it was atheists who led in that campaign. But they are not the only ones doing it. The Buddhists are supporting us, Muslims are supporting us, Jews are supporting us, Unitarians are supporting us. But historically, it's a fact that it was the atheists who first were the driving force behind this idea, which now so many religions are coming to agree with us in this. For our meditation, I suggest that we think of our beautiful planet and all the creatures we share with it and all the different hopes and beliefs that drive us. Let's pause and think of our own thoughts on where we fit in this planet. Let's read his closing words then. May the stars that shone on creation shine on you. May the moon light up your darkness. May you wander with the planets and wander safe home. May the sun warm you. May the earth count out your days and years with happiness.